Asking the attorney to create a Iowa County Attorneys Association.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being part of Crossroads today. I'm Connie Ryan. I'm the Executive Director of Interfaith Alliance of Iowa. Crossroads is a monthly luncheon that we hold, and really it's about civil conversations on important issues that impact our communities. And so we're really glad that you joined us today, whether you are in the room or online. Thank you for being with us. We are very excited and honored to have Kimberly Graham speak with us today, and the title of her presentation is Creating a Safer, Healthier, Fairer Polk County. As you know, Kimberly Graham is the first new Polk County attorney in 32 years. I told you it'd be a friendly crowd. And the first woman ever in that position. She took office just in January of 2023, and she is using evidence-based policies to create a healthy, safer community and more equitable and effective justice system for everyone, regardless of race, income, gender, or sexual orientation. Kimberly worked 23 years in private practice as a court-appointed defense attorney for low-income people, as an attorney for parents or children in child in need of assistance cases, and as a mediator. From 2018 to 2022, she also served as the attorney and guardian ad litem for children for the participants in the Polk County Recovery Court Program. She has degrees from University of California at Irvine and our own Drake University Law School. Go Bulldogs. And so I will turn it over to Kimberly. Thank you so much for being with us. It is our practice, if you're new to us, that Kimberly will talk for a little while, and then we will open it up to questions. I'll bring the microphone to you as you raise your hand so that people can hear in the room and online. So Kimberly, thank you for being with us.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Just afternoon. So I'm Kimberly Graham. I'm the Polk County Attorney. Which is still strange to say, but awesome to say. So thank you very much, Connie, for the invitation, and all of you for being here. So as Connie said in the introduction, our office's mission is to create a healthier, safer, thriving Polk County and to work to eliminate racial and income disparities in our justice system. So we've been doing a lot of things to shift things to make those all realities, and obviously none of that work will ever be done, unfortunately, but we're just going to keep working on it all the time. So I've been in office a bit over 90 days. And as I say, when people ask, how's it going? I say, well, it feels like I've been there 5 years, but in a good way. Because a lot has gone on in the last little over 90 days. A lot has gone on. I'm a night owl, so I typically get to the office about 9 a.m. and I usually leave around 8 p.m. So that's usually an average day for me. And I love every second of it. I don't feel tired. I don't feel the least bit stressed out. It's just amazing work. And I'm just drive home every day at 7 or 8 o'clock at night with a smile on my face because I cannot believe this is now my job, where I get to actually make decisions that make things more fair and equitable in our justice system. So I only have about 15 or 20 minutes before we take questions. This is just some of the stuff we've done in the last 90 days. So I'm going to really just like list at you, okay, so buckle up. So here's kind of a month by month. Here's kind of what's gone on. Okay, January. I was sworn in on January 3rd. Usually in an average year in Polk County, we have about 25 homicides. Anybody know how many we had in January? 8. 8 homicides in January. Luckily, we haven't had another one until about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, after that. But it was a really rough January. Some folks may or may not know that I am personally called every single time there's a homicide in this county, and then I go to the scene if it works out. Sometimes it depends on where they are in the investigation and what's going on, but most of the times I go to the scene. So there was a lot of getting up in the middle of the night and that kind of thing in January. Also, as soon as I took office, I inherited an officer-involved shooting. Again, we usually only have maybe one of those every other year or so in Polk County, an officer-involved shooting. Well, we had one December 26th. So as soon as I took office, I had to deal with that as well. So we went through that investigation and that process also in January. In the first week that I was in office, we started a policy of our office requesting people be released on their own recognizance from the Polk County Jail for non-violent, low-level offenses where there is no identifiable victim. And if there is a victim, we request the typical bond, but if there is not, then we request that those folks be released on their own recognizance. It's still ultimately up to the judge. It is not up to the prosecutor whether somebody is released or not. I want to be clear about that. But our office generally used to just request standard bond for every single whatever it was. And now we request that folks be released on their own recognizance. So that's been a change. We started working on our marijuana diversion program as soon as I took office, and we actually implemented that on March 21st. So we now have a low-level kind of personal use amount marijuana diversion program, where if someone is charged with first offense marijuana possession or paraphernalia possession, if they obtain a substance abuse evaluation and follow those recommendations, even if those recommendations are that they don't need any further treatment or anything, we will dismiss that charge. So that's already started as well. We've just been really increasing focus on victims of crime in the office. I heard from a number of people when I was running for office that they were not, and there's always going to be, can't make everyone happy, but I heard from a number of people that they were really unhappy with the way that they had interfaced with the Polk County Attorney's office when they were a victim of a crime. And so we've, when those are brought to my attention, if they're not, I can't do anything about it, but when they're brought to my attention, we make sure that we are listening to victims. I've invited victims into the office to sit down with me personally and listen to them and talk with them and explain process to them. So we've really kind of increased that focus and listening to victims in the office. Another move that I made pretty soon after I took office was we had an extremely experienced sexual assault prosecutor in our office who was on a very low-level docket because she was lower in seniority in the office, but she had already been a prosecutor in other jurisdictions for over 10 years prosecuting sexual assault, and she was amazing. And the office had kind of run previously on a seniority system as far as moving up in the dockets, which I don't think you should completely disregard seniority, but I also don't think that you should not have somebody in the position they're best suited for just because of the seniority, just because they came in at a certain time. So I moved her to the sexual assault docket, which is great. And then she had already applied to be a judge, and now she's gone. So we got your good news, we got your bad news, but for a short time, we had her on the sexual assault docket. So we've been looking really, really closely at waivers of people under age 18 into adult court. By looking closely, I mean, for now, I am personally looking at every single case where we're asking or potentially asking to put a child in adult court, or where they're direct filed. I don't know, you may all not know. By Iowa code, some offenses plus a certain age, certain offense, you're automatically put in adult court, and then your defense attorney has to make a motion to waive you back to juvenile court. And so I'm looking at that's called a reverse waiver. So I'm looking at reverse waivers and waivers personally and staffing those and talking to defense attorneys, and even in some cases talking to the child. I've gone out to the Polk County Detention Center and sat with a defense attorney and somebody under the age of 18 to really talk with them to just get a better handle on who they are and what they need and those kinds of things. And we don't have so many of those, fortunately, that I can't do that. You know, we're not Chicago, we're not LA, so we've got a small enough number that I'm able to personally look at every one of those. So for the time being, that's our policy, is that for a reverse waiver or waiver, it has to go through me. And I'll just tell you, I don't make those waiver decisions lightly, and I've already kept 3 kids out of adult court. So, all right, and I should say in those instances, it was because, in my opinion, even though the charges were absolutely serious, we had not offered those kids enough services. These were a lot of kids, at least 2 of those 3 kids I remember had no services in juvenile court ever. And yet we were asking to waive. And part of the issue is if the kid's 17 and a half or 17 and 10 months, those are the kids that, you know, you can't keep them in juvenile court. I don't want to get on this digression. This will be like 3-hour speech, which we don't have. But the point is that we only have so long to keep a kid in juvenile court. And so that becomes part of the calculus when we're deciding to waive or not waive, is how old is that child at the time that we're making a decision to waive or not waive. We, on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, I coordinated with Alex Cornia, who works for Iowa Legal Aid, to arrange an expungement clinic. So we were able to help folks about 90 people get their prior criminal records expunged. That can be a really difficult process for people. And usually it's kind of hard to figure out on your own. So you kind of have to have an attorney. So Legal Aid was kind of all these folks' attorney for this purpose. And I helped kind of wrangle the chief judge and wrangle another judge to just sit there and process the expungement orders as they came in, which I just want to put a plug for Judge Bill Kelly, who sadly we are losing from the district court bench. I went to law school with Judge Kelly, for those of you who don't know him. He's an amazing person. And he just recently got appointed to the federal bench. So he'll still be here in Des Moines, but he won't be in our district court any longer. But he was the one that volunteered to do all those expungement orders for that expungement clinic. I also was made aware that a lot of folks are sitting at the Polk County Jail waiting for a substance abuse evaluation. And they're sitting there and that's all they're waiting for. If they just had that, they could be released. So I contacted Tony Coleman, who's the CEO of Broadlawns, to see if he has any resources that he can kind of put at the Polk County Jail to get those substance abuse evaluations done more quickly. And unfortunately, we're still working on that, but I think we're going to be able to make it happen so that people aren't sitting just waiting for that. I'm going to skip some things. U visas. How many people know what a U visa is? So a U visa is a special kind of visa that folks can potentially get if they're a victim of a crime. So if they're here and they are undocumented and then they are a victim of a crime, they can potentially get a U visa. And I say potentially because there's lots of pieces to it and it takes a long time, like most visas and certain types of documentation take. But one of the first puzzle pieces of a U visa is that a law enforcement agency has to sign a certification that yes, that person was a victim of a crime and that they've been cooperative with prosecution and that kind of thing, and that they've been helpful and so on. Well, in speaking with several immigrant organizations, I learned that sometimes at the Polk County Attorney's Office, they were not signing those U visa certification documents. And again, I want to be clear, this isn't that the Polk County Attorney's Office can give someone citizenship. This is just one starting piece of the puzzle in someone's ability to ultimately get a U visa. So I think part of it was ignorance. I think part of it was our prosecutors not understanding that this is not them giving someone citizenship. This isn't somebody making a judgment about whether someone should be a citizen or not, or have documentation status or not. This is simply certifying, yes, victim of crime, yes, cooperative with law enforcement. So we've made an office-wide policy that we are presumptively signing all U visa certifications unless a prosecutor has a question about it or an issue, in which case they need to come to me. Otherwise, they need to sign those. And when I've talked to immigrants organizations here, like Luna, and I was just talking to Sonia Perez, who a lot of you might know yesterday, who I went to law school with too. I had a great law school class, I'm telling you. The people I went to law school with were amazing. So they're very excited about that new policy in our office because it's going to make things a lot easier for those folks. So again, and continuing with kind of having more outreach and communication with victims, I met with the mother of a homicide victim. There was a homicide, I believe, in early December. And this mother who lives in Chicago was just not really getting any answers very easily from anyone. And she had flown out here and asked to meet with me. So I sat down with her and we were able to have a good conversation and also continue that investigation, which has been ongoing. And initially that case kind of happened when just a few weeks before the prior county attorney was retiring and before I was coming in. And a lot of pieces of that, unfortunately, in my view, kind of got lost in the shuffle. So we were able to kind of refocus on that investigation and make some charges in that case. So we've got some first-degree murder charges pending in that case, and currently looking for the alleged perpetrators in another jurisdiction. So that was good. In March, that's when the legislature started ramping up a little bit more. So we actually spent quite a bit of time talking to folks from an organization called Reform Alliance, which some of you may be familiar with. And they were proposing a bill that they've been proposing all over the country, but they're proposing here in Iowa, that would allow people on probation or on probation to get credits to get off probation early if they completed certain things, which we know are linked to a decrease in recidivism, namely if they get some more education or if they're employed for a certain length of time, things like that. So that's fantastic, and I'm 100% for that. There's a but coming, right? But what these folks from outside of Iowa didn't know is that they were saying, oh yeah, but we don't want to hurt people, right? We got to balance. We want people off probation early, but we also don't want people harmed. And particularly in stalking cases and domestic violence cases, in cases where there's been physical harm to folks, and especially in a lot of the DV cases. I don't want people off probation early. They get a lot of great services that are really targeted to their history, to their mental health, to different things that are going to help them have a lower recidivism rate down the road. And their probation officer is the one that I believe who knows them best at that point, who needs to determine what services they need to continue to do and not do. So we started talking to those folks, and when they approached me about that bill to see if I would, come out publicly in favor of it. And I said, well, that's great. And we need an exception, in my view, for these violent crimes, right? And they said, oh, but we have an exception. We have an exception for felonies. We have an exception for felonies, Kimberly. And I went, but a lot of our violent crimes in Iowa are not felonies. They're aggravated misdemeanors. Well, these were attorneys from other states who thought, oh, if we just exclude felonies, we're good. Like, no. So we worked with them to change the language in that bill. And I think did anybody know it either passed or it looks like it's still going to, I think, with that exception that we helped kind of educate them about and carve out. So I was really, really happy about that. We also publicly announced our support for a bill that would increase quite drastically the penalties for human trafficking, which I couldn't be happier about because we just don't currently have enough teeth in the human trafficking laws in Iowa, but they're about to get a lot more stringent, which is great. I learned in March about a whole new way of intaking juvenile cases, particularly delinquency cases. So, and this was from John Choi. I don't know, who knows who John Choi is? Oh my gosh, okay. John Choi is this amazing prosecutor in Ramsey County. So Ramsey County is St. Paul, Minnesota. And he's been a prosecutor up there for over 20 years. And he himself will tell you that he was a very different kind of prosecutor for the first majority part of his career. And then he began looking at data and statistics and evidence that showed him that some of the ways that he was doing things were not actually reducing recidivism as well as some maybe newer ways and newer thinking around criminal justice reform. So he's become quite a forward-thinking, evidence-based prosecutor in the last number of years. So one of the things he has implemented is in his juvenile division, and they've just implemented this a year ago. They've just now starting to get some data, which is great because then we're going to be able to use that data down here to drive our decisions. He has put together a collaborative team to do all of his juvenile intake, his juvenile delinquency intake. So instead of just a prosecutor making decisions about that, prosecutor who doesn't know this kid, right? Doesn't know this kid's history, doesn't know the services in the community that might be able to help this kid to get on a different and better path. There's a prosecutor, a defense attorney, a member of that child's community, and one or two other people that I always forget what their role is, but there's like a team of folks that intake all of the cases to make better decisions for these kids. So when we can safely divert these kids out of the system and not even have them involved in the system, that is by far the best decision we can make, because as soon as a kid gets involved in the criminal legal system, the statistics and the data on that are absolutely appalling. it's the slippery slope factor. And there's a lot of pieces to that I do not have time to get into today. But the more that we can keep that kid in the community and get more services around that family, not just the kid, the better. And so we have a lot better success when we do that. So we're going to hopefully implement that similar intake policy by the end of this year. It'll take a bit for us to get it together, but that'll be great. What else have we done? We've joined Polk County's DEI committee. Polk County Attorney's Office had never had any representation on the DEI committee ever. And so we now have two of our office on the DEI committee for Polk County.
What is DEI?
Diverse, equity, and inclusion. Yeah, I always second guess myself. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Yep. And Polk County does have a full-time DEI person on staff now, and that's fairly new in the last couple of years, I believe. I have also, and no, your eyes aren't deceiving you, but I've also joined the Black Prosecutors Association, which you can join even if you're not a Black prosecutor. And part of the reasoning for that, there's many of them. One is because I would like to be part of that organization. Two is they're having a conference in Chicago in August that I'm going to attend, and they're having a job fair. And I want to go there so that I can recruit. I know. Hi, come to Iowa. It's great. But I will do my best. So I would like to, I would very much like to have our office look more like our community as far as not only race, but also income levels and background. I would like to have a lot more prosecutors that do not come from upper middle and upper income backgrounds. I think that's really important to understand firsthand what it's like not to grow up with a lot of money when you're a prosecutor, because the majority of people in the system, in the criminal legal system, are living in poverty. So that's a big goal of mine. And it truly is tough, not only because it's Iowa and we have so many things going in the wrong direction politically, in my view, and I'm sure in your views. So it's a tough sell. It's a really tough sell to recruit folks here, but we'll do our best. We'll do our best. Let's see. Oh, this is huge. We were able to get this done pretty quickly, and I absolutely thank my staff for this because they had to work so hard to make this happen really fast. Also, Polk County IT department had to work really hard to make this happen. So when I took office, I was asking about the LRP program. LRP is License Reinstatement Program. So if your license is suspended or barred because you owe fines or fees for particular offenses, it's not for all, and again, we don't have time to get into the weeds, but for certain offenses, if you owe fines and fees and your license is suspended because you haven't been able to pay them, through our license reinstatement program, you can get your license back, and you just have to pay every month. You can make monthly payments and keep your license reinstated so that you then don't get a driving while barred charge, which eventually can put you in prison for driving while barred, which to me is basically like punishing people for being poor, because most people, if they could pay the fines and fees, they would have already paid them, right? So I said, okay, and I'm learning about this program from my staff. Okay, and how much a month is that for people to get their license back? And they said $50, and I went, what? $50 a month? I'm like, can they pay less if they're like in poverty? No, it's $50 a month. I went, that might as well be $5,000 a month. Are you kidding me? And that's something you probably don't know if you come from privilege and you're making $150,000 a year as a prosecutor. You don't understand what it's like for people to live in poverty, but I do. And so I said, well, can we change that? Can I change that? They said, well, yeah, we said it, 20 years ago at $50 a month, so I guess you can change it. So I talked to, again, the fabulous Alex Cornia at Iowa Legal Aid, because he is an expert in fines and fees and all of that area, if you ever need an expert to talk about that. And he said, well, why don't you use the IRS's ability to pay calculator? That's what we're using, he said, for certain things. I said, fantastic. So the IRS's ability to pay calculator already takes into account geographic location. So it takes into account that an apartment in Des Moines costs less than an apartment in New York City, that kind of thing. So you just put in your income, where you live, a few other pieces of it, how big your household is, et cetera, and it spits out in that you know, in the opinion of the calculator, what is your ability to pay? So if it's 0, which it could be, we charge people $1 now, $1 a month to get their license back, so that they don't end up with suspended license and borrowed license. So that got implemented a few weeks ago. So it's changed. So now a lot more people can get their license back, even if they owe $1,000. So let's see, how many more minutes do I have, Connie? 5, okay. Well, I'm on April now, so we're good. Okay, we're good. Okay, we're up to April. Okay. So this month, so some folks from the Federal Department of Justice were out here this past week from a kind of an organization that's working with the DOJ called Justice Counts. It's the Justice Counts Initiative. And what Justice Counts is about is kind of what it sounds like: count, numbers, evidence, data. So they're going around to all these different law enforcement agencies, prosecutors, police, et cetera, in the country, and trying to get us all to input our data into this federal database so that we have the best statistics and data that we have to drive the correct decisions. So we've engaged with them this past week. I met with them extensively, and we're going to be getting onto that program. So we're going to be, whatever data we can get together for them, we're going to be entering into a federal database so that we can all use that data across the country and also here in Polk County. Just yesterday, I met with the so there's going to be a new Guatemalan consulate in Omaha. It's going to open probably by August is their target date. And so the consular general was here yesterday, and we all met, several people from the community met with him at Sonia Perez's office. Sonia Perez, if you don't know her, does a lot of immigration work, and again, went to law school with her. I have to name drop. She's so amazing. She's just amazing. So met with him and talked to him about that U visa, you know, the U visas and all the different services he's going to be able to offer to folks who come from Guatemala. So that's going to be a great resource for folks. And his office is going to cover Iowa, North and South Dakota, and Nebraska. So at least initially. So that's just going to be a great resource for folks that are here from Guatemala. Also this week, I think it was on Wednesday, I drove out to Oakdale to the Iowa Medical Classification Center, which, for folks that don't know, when you get sentenced to prison in Iowa, the first place you go is Oakdale, which is near Iowa City, and that's where they classify you. So they do a lot of testing, they do educational testing, they do mental health testing, medical testing. You know, they find out more about you so that they can place you in the facility that would match you best, because there's a number of different facilities. Some are higher security, lower security, etc. So I went out to Oakdale because I think it's really important if we're going to ask that people get sent to prison, that we know what those prisons look like, and we have visited, and we know what services go on there, and we know as much as we can about those facilities. So that was great. It took about almost 3 hours to tour the entire facility. There's about 1,000 people there, 1,000 inmates. At that facility, including, and this is why I wanted to go there first, including where children tried as adults and sentenced as adults start their sentences. So they start at Oakdale, and they're in a segregated, not that it makes it better, I don't think it does, but I mean it does, but not that it makes it inconsequential, but they are segregated, which was something I really wanted to find out about, and I wanted to physically see, and they took us, I mean, in with the inmates. So, I mean, we were back in the, you know, right back where the inmates are. And, you know, got to chat a little bit with some of the kids that were there. One of whom is somebody that was sent there from our office, you know, was prosecuted by our office. One of the East High School shooters who killed somebody. So it was really good to see, you know, exactly what they have there. And so just something to know about IMCC, it's kind of become more of a medical facility feeder for all the other prisons, because they have a clinic on site. They have basically a nursing home on site, because people that are serving a life sentence are going to get old and pass away there. And they just got a ton of different divisions and facilities within the facility. So, okay, let me skim through this because I only got like 1 more minute, I think, before we start questions. About a week and a half ago, I met with Helen Helen Reddy. Yeah, exactly. I know. I was thinking, is it Reddy? No, that was an old pop star. So Helen Eddy, who's the head of Polk County Behavioral Health here in Polk County, she's the head honcho of Polk County Behavioral Health. And she approached me about partnering to start a gun safety initiative. So somewhere in the next 6 months to a year, we're going to start rolling out a lot of different pieces of that. There is no one answer, especially in Iowa, because the answer we want, we're not going to get as far as reducing gun violence. So we have to do what we can, we have to do what's available to us. So things like gun locks, things like educating people about not leaving their firearms in their car. There's been a lot of firearms stolen out of vehicles. That happens frequently. So educating people about the fact that you're going to carry your gun around. There are gun safes for cars that you bolt to the bottom of like the floor of the passenger seat that you can lock your gun in while you're not in your vehicle. Locking up guns with a gun lock when the guns are in your home is helpful, and it's a deterrent, especially for kids for little kids getting a hold of guns and accidentally shooting themselves or one of their playmates. So there's just a lot that we're going to do. We're going to do whatever we can to educate people and to reduce gun violence of all kinds here in Iowa. So that's going to be something that we're going to be starting to do. And then the last thing I'll mention is, y'all know an organization called Boys Town? Yeah. So old organization, used to be more of a residential facility. They still have a residential facility. I believe it's in Omaha or Council Bluffs, Omaha. But they've kind of moved over the years to doing a lot more in-home work, like in-home social work. And they're great at it. And they've been at it forever. And we have a truancy court. If you don't know, there's a truancy court in Polk County. So for families that are having difficulty getting their kids to school, or their kids are going in the front door and walking out the back, the parents might be dropping them off, and they're older kids that can kind of leave school after they get dropped off. And up to a certain point, the parents are going to, of course, be held responsible for those kids not being in school. But most of the time, if not all the time, there's a lot of significant issues happening in that home that are preventing the kids from being present at school. So, rather than having a more punitive approach, we want to take a more social work. We want to take the approach that works. I know, silly, right? But we want to take the approach that works, which is more services, finding out what the real problems are, and addressing those problems at the root cause whenever we're able to. So we've met with some of the folks at Boys Town about writing a grant together to get funding to have their workers work with these families that have been identified to us from schools as having issues that have brought them to the attention of truancy court. So we're hoping to be able to reduce the truancy and get more kids in schools and get more services wrapped around the families wherever we can. So there's more, but those are a few things that we've done in the last 90 days.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. The answer to your question on the probation bill is it's House File 349, and it's eligible for debate in the Senate. And so that can be something. If you get our legislative updates, it's in there as well. So anyway, just so folks know. And if you have a question, just raise your hand and I'll bring the microphone to you. And then folks who are online, you can put your questions in the chat.
Thank you for joining us today. It's good to hear from you. Many of us were hoping that you would be elected to the U.S. Senate the last time out, but I think we're now beginning to realize that you can do us more good in Polk County than you could have in Washington. So I had one suggestion: when you go to the Black Prosecutors Job Clinic, don't use the pitch, "Come to Iowa, isn't it wonderful?" But come to Iowa, we need you.
Yeah.
My question, though, is how dark is the shadow of the power of the new governor's attorney general to step in and override the local prosecutors about what cases are going to be prosecuted?
Yeah, so obviously I've been asked a lot about that, as I would expect. So far, I can only talk about so far. I mean, it's not been very long. So far, we've continued to have a good working relationship with the Attorney General's office. As often happens, our prosecutors work with prosecutors in the AG's office. It's not me working with Brenna Bird necessarily. And those relationships, for example, Scott Brown is somebody who's been at the AG's office for, I don't even know, 25 plus years, maybe longer. I'm sorry, Scott, if you see this, and I don't know how long you've been there. But he's amazing. And when we have a conflict case, we send it up to Scott Brown at the AG's office, and that was the same under Tom Miller, and that's going to continue to be the same. So, those relationships that we have with the rank and file kind of folks that are working there, she did let go of about 19 folks there, but, there's still a ton of folks still there who we've had long-going relationships with between my office and that office, and those will continue. I don't know, of course, I don't know, but I suspect that some of that desire to override or be able to step into local county attorney's office and prosecute crimes, even if the local county attorney doesn't request that assistance, might be driven by the fact that I would assume that by next legislative session, probably abortion will be illegal in the state of Iowa. And when it is, then I would imagine that if I don't prosecute someone for having an abortion, then she may want to have that right to do so. So that to me seems like one of the most logical reasons why that would, beyond that, I don't know. I don't know what their reasoning is, but I will tell you that a lot of folks have, of course, said, oh, this is all about you. This is because you got elected. It's not about me. It's honestly not. This is the playbook from Florida. This is the playbook from everywhere where there is a bright red state and a red governor and progressive, forward-thinking, evidence-based prosecutors elected. This is the playbook. It's not unique to Iowa by any stretch of the imagination. It's just usurping local control. Republicans are about local control until they don't like what's going on at the local level, and then they want to preempt local control. And that's just what's happening here. Yeah. So.
We have a question from David online. What are your thoughts about prosecuting businesses for wage theft?
Yeah, so didn't get to it. It's on the list. So that's definitely something that I'm incredibly interested in. I've already done quite a bit of work on. There's a woman named Terry Gerstein, who is a nationally renowned, she's an attorney, and she used to be with the Department of Labor, I believe, and she's a national expert on wage theft prosecutions, being able to be done at local county attorney's office and district attorney's offices. I've been in a lot of conversations with her and have learned a lot from her in the last couple of months about this issue, as well as talking to Eli Savitt, who is the district attorney in Washtenaw, Michigan, because he has started to partner with the Department of Labor to locally prosecute some, not just wage theft, but other kind of workers' rights cases if we can find the evidence and if they violate a criminal statute. The problem and the challenge that we still have here in Iowa is that we don't have a wage theft statute. There is no wage theft statute, like criminally is what I'm talking about. So we can try, and we will be looking into whether we can try some of these cases under the general theft statute. But as you might imagine, it's a little different animal, wage theft versus, I took your whatever, thing. So we're just having to look at that, and we're also looking at past Iowa Supreme Court and Court of Appeals cases and what those are telling us, we think, about how we're going to have to approach these as a criminal prosecution. Because what we can find so far from the Court of Appeals and the Iowa Supreme Court is there has not been an actual wage theft case that's gone up on appeal, but there have been cases involving like contractors, like I hire this person to come do my roof, right? And they take my money and they never build the roof, those kind of cases. And what we seem to see from those sorts of cases is we're probably going to need to show a pattern and practice of wage theft. So then that even increases the burden about the kind of mountain of evidence that we're going to need to assemble in order to be able to successfully prosecute those cases. But we've talked to a number, especially of immigrant organizations and union and labor leaders, to tell them to please, if a case happens in Polk County, please do bring it to our attention and we will take a look at it and see what we can do about it. And, I'm hoping someday we'll have an actual wage theft statute. Minnesota just passed one, not just, a few years ago now, 2-3 years ago, something in that neighborhood. So if we could get a statute specifically designed for wage theft, that would be really helpful.
Hi, thanks for coming. I had a question. You mentioned doing things in ways that work. I'm interested in the data collection, what it costs to do things in a way that works, and what's the reward or the cost on the other end. Like when we've done it right, how much money have we saved? How many lives have we improved? That kind of thing. Is that data collection underway, going to happen?
Well, it's complicated and multi-tiered, and there's a lot of different angles you have to approach it from. So what I mean by that is most criminal cases in this country are resolved by plea bargain, right? They don't go to trial. Vast majority of cases they're never going to go to trial. They don't go to trial. There is almost zero data available on plea bargains. The way that most cases in this country get resolved, we have almost no data nationwide. It's not just an Iowa problem or a Polk County problem. So there is a, group at Duke University that have started a specific plea bargain data collection project. And there's a number of DA's offices across the country that are now participating in that. And I've approached them about our office participating in that as well. So that's kind of the first step, is looking at what is the charge, what is the outcome, what's all the demographic data of these people as well, so we can also analyze racial and income disparities vis-a-vis plea bargaining. I'm just going to tell you, spoiler alert, the poorer you are, the more likely you are to plead quickly, especially if you're sitting in jail and you need to get out. So there's just a lot of pieces there. And then that's part of the Justice Counts initiative too, is collecting kind of larger data. We also have our, I never get their initials right. Someday I probably will get the initials right. The Office of Criminal and Juvenile Justice Planning, I think it is, CJJP. They're housed in the Iowa Department of Human Rights, and they are amazing. And they have a lot. They go about collecting data all the time from within Iowa, and so they're a really good source of numbers for us. And I've just now started conversations with them, kind of as the dust has settled a little bit on me transitioning into office, to not only get more data from them, but provide data to them. And the Polk County Attorney's Office is quite problematic in that, in the data realm, in that we use a very antiquated software case management system called JD, Judicial Dialogue. It's not even cloud-based. It's literally installed on everybody's machine. And it's just really hard to quickly and easily, the data's all there, so I don't want to make it sound like we're not keeping track of anything. We are, but it's just very cumbersome and manual labor to go gather all this data from different pieces of JD and so forth. So one of the longer term projects, if I get reelected in 3.5 years, get your walking shoes on now. I know Phil will be out there knocking doors again, is to change the JD. And it's going to be expensive and it's going to take time, but we need a more robust, more efficient case management system that will then allow us to both collect and disseminate data. Namely, I want to be able to disseminate data more quickly and easily to you, to all of you who live in Polk County and to whom we are accountable. And the way that our system is set up right now, it just makes it a lot more difficult for us to do that in a timely way.
We have a question from Rosemary. Does the gun safety training deal with dispelling fear? It seems that we are being taught that we can trust no one and using a gun is the answer to protect ourselves.
So Helen and I literally just had lunch last Friday for the first time about this whole initiative that we're excited about and excited to get going. That's a great point, and it definitely should. I mean, if I had my way, kindergartners would learn mindfulness, in kindergarten and start learning how to control their thoughts and recognize thoughts as they arise and understand that they are not their thoughts, and understand that strong emotions arise because humans are chemically wired to have strong emotions, but we don't have to act and react to every single thing we feel. And all of those things. So, that's a big piece of it. And that's something too that side note, we have a YOP, the Youthful Offenders Program that we have for younger folks who get into pretty serious, usually involving firearms, criminal trouble. And I'm looking at that program, how we should definitely keep it, but we need, I think, revise it a lot and teach them some different things that I don't think we are really focusing on as much yet as we need to. And one of those things, again, is kind of learning about your brain and learning how human brains work and learning that you can breathe a few times between stimulus and response. And just those few seconds can make all the difference between whether you're reacting or responding. So those are some other things that we want to definitely do.
Thank you for emphasizing over and over again the fact that you can't change anything until you can measure it. I run a Reddit sub, and I'd like to be able to list some of the things that you have and your office have accomplished in the past 3-4 months. Is there easy access to this through your office?
Yeah, we can get those. I mean, I literally just, so, you know.
That's what
so
I want right there.
I just
Yeah.
like, I have a document on my own personal laptop, and every few days when I go home from work at night, I go, okay, what have we been doing the last few days? And I look at my calendar just so I can kind of really keep track, because man, I'm telling you, the days go by like that, and it's easy to forget all the things that we're doing all the time. But yeah, you can certainly, you can always contact me through the county attorney email, which is on the county attorney's website. I think it's ctty@polkcountyiowa.gov, but you can go to the website and contact us that way, and we can get that information to you.
Hi, Kim.
Hey, Steve.
You know, if
Steve
you're
and I
looking
go way
for,
back from Indianola.
if you're
Yeah.
looking for career advancement, we can always use you in Warren County. My question goes way back into your presentation, and you were talking about, as I understood, immigrants being able to get criminal charges acknowledged. Would these be criminal charges that happened in the United States, or are you saying going way back into their country of origin?
Are you talking about the U visa program?
I'm not sure, but you made a statement that if we had helped people establish that a crime had happened to them.
Oh, yeah.
Is
Yes,
that
would
crime,
have to
is
happen.
crime in the
As
States?
now, you know what? That's a good question, because I'm definitely not an immigration attorney. I am not, and that's a whole expertise, like a very picky expertise area of the law. Sonia Paris would know that. If someone else here knows the answer or thinks they know the answer, feel free. But I believe that the crime has to have happened here. Has to have happened here. And in fact, for me to sign the U visa certification, it needs to have happened in my jurisdiction.
What's the advantage of that?
Then they can get onto this U visa track where they can ultimately, if everything else goes as they want, get documentation and become documented instead of being undocumented here.
My package to you here in the document, that gives you a fast track to documentation?
I wouldn't say fast, but it could give you a path. I think that's probably better put. Yeah.
Well, what you're talking about here is just music to my ears. I was the chief juvenile court officer for the 5th District, and we worked really, really hard to implement evidence-based practices in the juvenile court system, which was sometimes a challenge with our partners in the larger community.
And
so
it's just now that whole ship, you'll be glad to hear, Marilyn, is turning in that direction, even to the point, I'm sure you know about the Eldora, the state training school.
right.
They were in litigation because they were using very ineffective policies with those kids at Eldora. And these are kids that have gotten kind of in the most serious, violent sorts of trouble typically. And I actually just heard a presentation from the folks from the state training school, which, by the way, we only have for boys. We don't have one for girls at all, and we need one. And they have just, I mean, they have just they're doing amazing stuff out there. They now have regular therapy for those kids. They now are using evidence-based practices. They're being more relational and less punitive with the kids. They've just come a long way. Yeah.
Well, it would have been wonderful to have you as my partner.
Another question online, this one from Alicia. What do you think about the expanded authority just approved for the Attorney General to get involved in a local case if the local county attorney decides not to get involved in that case?
Yeah. So maybe you just popped on, Alicia. We already answered that, but I'll answer it again briefly. I don't think a whole lot about it at this point. I do my job, and we're gonna create a healthier, safer, thriving Polk County. So that's what I'm worried about, Polk County. And I'm not gonna worry about what the Attorney General is gonna do or not do at this point. We're doing our job, we're doing a good job, and our work will speak for itself.
Before COVID, I was inside the jail a lot, working with inmates. And it was distressing. At least two shared that they were told by the prosecutor that take 10 years, because if it goes to jury trial, you'll be in for life. Has that policy changed?
Well, it would never be our office's policy to say something like that. So, and again, as far as we have about 55 or so prosecutors, total staff of 124, and over 1,000 criminal cases a month. That's just criminal. That doesn't count all our juvenile cases in the civil division. So needless to say, I can't know everything that's said by every prosecutor in every case. That's definitely not something I would ever condone, and I would tell someone they're not to be saying something like that to anyone. I have, just in general terms, I came in on my first day and made it abundantly clear that what I had at least heard happened on many occasions. Prosecutors being disrespectful or rude or sarcastic to defense attorneys or defendants or others. Different ways that people were treated even within the office. Again, most people in the office are great and treat everybody respectfully, but I was told of a few instances where assistant county attorneys had yelled at some support staff or something or other. There's no place for yelling in my office. So I was really clear in the very first all staff meeting that we had on January 3rd that everyone in our office was to treat everyone with professionalism and respect and civility and kindness. And if I hear something to the contrary, then we'll have a talk about that in my office. They can have candy out of the candy bowl while we discuss why that behavior is not okay. And obviously if it continued to happen, then that's going to be serious. And maybe my office isn't a good fit for them anymore. So I made that all very explicit and very clear. I was really happy that about a month ago, a defense attorney that I've worked with in the past called me and just said, "Hey, I just want you to know, I don't know what you're doing in there, but I've noticed some of your prosecutors are being a lot more, just a lot more kind in our conversations." A lot more. I said, good, glad to hear it. So yeah, hopefully that's shifting and will continue to shift.
One of the areas that I've been concerned with long time ago is that there's no consideration to wealth or poverty in the fines that are imposed. I know that other states have, in fact, gone to a system in which a person's wealth will be factored into the fines. Are you I know county attorneys in the past in Iowa, through their organization, have proposed legislation to change different things in our criminal justice system. Is that a proposal that's being considered?
It's not a proposal that I'm aware of that's being considered this legislative session for sure. I haven't heard of it. But through the Iowa County Attorneys Association, which is our organization of all of us who are county attorneys, we can propose legislation, and we have a legislative agenda every year. And so like one of our legislative agenda pieces was increasing the penalty for sex trafficking and other human and labor trafficking this year, which looks like we're going to get to happen. But that was not one, and we have to keep it at 2 or 3 things, because if we have too many, we don't have enough time to focus on them. But that's a really, really great proposal, and certainly one I can make to the ICAA. And I know that not only have other states at least proposed, I don't know, and Bill, if you find out about any other states that have actually gone to a ability to pay sort of a fine fee structure, let me know so I can provide that data to ICAA. But I know there are a few European countries, Western European countries, that have like more or less an ability to pay with fines and fees, so that someone who's far wealthier is going to get a meaningful fine for them, and somebody who's in poverty is going to get a meaningful fine for them, right? The fines have to be meaningful. $100 fine for someone that makes $200,000 a year is not meaningful, right? $100 fine for somebody that's living below poverty is the difference between not eating or not paying your rent. It's pretty big difference. So I agree, we should work to change that.
This is a good follow-up question. Hi, Kimberly. With League of Women Voters is studying the ability of people to pay, as well as bail bond and pretrial issues. And one of the things I've come across is a document from a legal aid national review of all the states, but they had a chapter on Iowa. They had 3 states they singled out for their own chapter, and Iowa was one of them. And they talked a lot about our cumbersome ability to pay process, and how people have to fill out 1-page form for defense fees, and then they have to initiate and ask for like a 5-page form for ability to pay fines and fees for restitution. I think it's called Part B restitution. So they said, well, you need to get away from all of that. And I just wondered how this is impacting your office, and what you have to say about it.
Well, I mean, that more so impacts defendants and defense attorneys, I mean, than our office. You know, not that it doesn't, but I mean, they're the ones that, again, have to, like you said, they have to make that motion and request an ability to pay hearing and try to prove to a judge why they need to have that amount reduced if it's possible, or whatever, you know, whatever the specific situation is. It varies a lot from case to case and depends on what the crime was and what the restitution is. But that really involves the defense bar more so than us. But, you know, yeah, if we could get more of ability to pay from the outset when we're setting fines and fees, that would help reduce all of this on the back end.
Hi, Kimberly, I have a question about, you spoke earlier about the use of plea deals and how poverty drives the prison population and the jail population. There's few rich people are in jail.
Right.
So, and I know this isn't your work, but the work of the public defender's office, what kind of caseloads do those people have? And I know the office contracts with private attorneys to provide some of those services, but I think those defendants get very little time with who's assigned to them.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about your experience in working with them?
Yeah. So the short answer, I don't know the exact numbers on average. Like, I don't know the average caseload of a public defender. And just for folks that don't know, so when we say public defender, there's public defenders who are employed by the state of Iowa. They get a salary and they do public defense work all day, every day. And then there's people like I used to be who are contract public defenders. So we have a private practice, right? So we can take other kinds of cases too. But for me, at least the last 10, 12 years, the majority of my practice was court appointed criminal and juvenile defense. So the judge would appoint me, and then I would do billing and then bill the state of Iowa, the public defender's office. And then they would pay me the princely sum of, well, it used to be $60 an hour. God bless Jeff Wright, our state public defender, because he's worked so hard to continue to push that up, the hourly rate. And I know that 60 or 68 bucks, and I think it's 68 now, sounds like a lot of money, but there's a lot of things you cannot bill for, and you're also paying your rent out of that $68 an hour for your office. You're paying potentially at least a full-time support person out of that $68 an hour. You're paying your self-employment taxes out of that $68 an hour. You're paying your health insurance 100% on your own when you're self-employed out of that $68 an hour. Do you see where $68 an hour suddenly is more like 20? So by the time you pay all those things, you would actually make more money per hour as a manager at a Quick Trip than as somebody like the work I used to do, which is defend poor people on a contract basis. So it doesn't pay enough. And like I said, Jeff Wright is a former defense attorney who's now the head of the PD's office for the last many years. And he's great because he's been there. He's exactly been there, and he knows how hard it is to make a living at that. So he's tried to get those increased, but it's a huge problem. And with the whole macro labor shortage, that's affected attorneys as well. And with the student loans growing for folks that are fairly new out of law school, that's another factor, because typically it's younger lawyers with less experience, not always, but a lot of times, who do those court appointed cases to try to get more experience. They know they're not going to make a bunch of money, but they're okay because they need to get the court time and they need to build up their experience. But those attorneys can no longer afford, a lot of them, to take those cases because they can't afford to pay their student loans. You know, when you leave Drake Law School and you owe 100 grand for your law school education, you may not be able to afford to take a job that's going to pay you $50,000 or $60,000 a year. So you have to go and try to get the highest paying job you can. So it's a huge problem. I mean, so much so in the last couple of years since COVID, especially, that Chief Justice Christensen has created like a task force and has sent out surveys to those of us who do court appointed work or used to do court appointed work, to ask, to try to get more information on, like, basically to try to find out what will get more of you to take court appointed cases who are in the private bar, because there's not enough of us who are willing to do that.
We have one last question.
Good afternoon. Looking at the audience, I am hesitant to ask this question, but the state of Iowa is being hit by massive nursing home abuse. And I'm wondering if your office would be the first place to hit in the Des Moines area, because the state of Iowa, I'm getting the impression it'd be like going to the bathroom in the wind.
Right.
You're getting it all back on you.
Right.
And looking at the audience, I myself have been in 2 of those. One sued me because I left it on my own. I was sued for breach of contract. Would your office be willing to be the first step, I guess is what I'm asking?
Yeah. So for cases of abuse or neglect of a dependent adult, we often are the first step. And I mean, law enforcement has to investigate, refer the case to us. We have other channels that we get cases referred to us from. We do have one full-time assistant county attorney whose sole job it is to deal with elder abuse and neglect cases. I would like to add another one. I mean, our population in Iowa is not aging backwards. So that's going to be an increasing area of need. And that's kind of something on my, long list of additional attorneys that I would like to hire. I mean, Polk County isn't getting less populated either. As the rural areas kind of decline and more people move to the cities, our office is going to grow. The Polk County Attorney's office is going to grow, and there's going to be more and more people in Polk County as time goes on. So among the attorneys that I would like to add, I'd like to add another full-time elder abuse, independent adult neglect attorney. I would like to add another domestic violence prosecutor. We have 2 full-time domestic violence prosecutors right now, and they are slammed all the time. They cannot take as many cases to trial as they would like to, because they cannot clone themselves, and there's just not enough hours in the day. So this one of the last things I'll kind of say is, when you see a headline in the paper, there's, as usual, way more to the story than you see, especially, I can tell you for sure, especially where it involves the Polk County Attorney's office.
The federal will fine them, say $10,000, and the state comes in and cuts it down to $6,500.
Yeah, if it's civil, that's not, I mean, that may not be an area that I have jurisdiction over, but if it's a criminal offense, then that is certainly an area that our office can and does get involved with. I mean, we prosecute people for adult abuse and neglect all the time.
And 9 times out of 10, the owner will close it rather than fix it. They grab the money and run. And
Just
that's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, we'll let Kimberly finish, and folks online can't hear you when you're talking in the room too, so it's all right, it's all right, it's all right, but if you want to finish.
Yeah. So, one thing that I always like to, whenever I'm speaking in a big group like this, to encourage you to do is, please, 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 if you have a question about a headline you read, if you have a question in the paper, oh my God, I can't believe Polk County Attorney's Office did this, what is Kimberly doing? Email me and I'll tell you what I'm doing as much as I can. So if it's a current pending investigation, there may be things I cannot tell you, and I'll tell you that. If you ask me a question and I can't tell you because it's a pending investigation, I'll say, look, I would love to fully explain all this to you right now. I can't, because I cannot jeopardize a current ongoing investigation. But I will always tell you as much as I can tell you. And I will always be honest with you. So if you have a question about me, about the office's policies, about a case that you read about, please contact my office. I am always happy to talk to anyone about anything at any time, as long as somebody's not being like physically abusive or super, super verbally abusive. I understand that my job is to be a public servant, and that means to listen to you, even and especially when I disagree with you. So you're always welcome to contact my office. Thank you so much. I love being here.
Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you for spending time with us, and thank you for your work. We very much appreciate it. The funny thing is, next month, we have Cameron Middlebrook, who is the Iowa connection to the program that Kimberly talked about with the probation bill. Cameron Middlebrook has been around Iowa for a very long time, has done different jobs, and is currently working for Reform Alliance. And so you'll want to come back, because that's kind of another piece of the puzzle in this work. So thank you so much for being here and for being part of Crossroads. Thank you for being online if you're watching, and have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.